When Undertale first released in 2015, if for some crazy reason you decided to go to a website called deltarune.com, you'd be greeted with this message. Written in wingdings, it translates to, 3 heroes appear to banish the angels' heaven. This was where everything would begin. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know of this message's existence or its importance until years later. Undertale was a fun little indie game created in 2015 by the amazing Toby Fox. This is what I believe a perfect video game looks like. Incredible characters, engaging story, fun gameplay, and at the heart of it all, a message about how our choices impact others. However, as much as I could gush about Undertale all day, that is not what we're here to do today. No, today we'll be analyzing some of Undertale, and mainly its parallel story Deltarune, many hidden lore secrets. Specifically the lore of one W.D. Gaster. You may ask, who is W.D. Gaster, and why does he even matter? Well, it all starts with fun values. When you start a playthrough of Undertale, the game in the code picks a number from 1 to 100. These fun events vary from funny little moments, like Alfie's calling you for pizza, and some more important ones. For example, if you get one of the numbers 61, 62, or 63, there is a small chance to encounter one of these NPCs who in the code are labeled as Gaster followers. When talked to, the first follower states, Alfies might work faster, but the old royal scientist, W.D. Gaster, one day he vanished without a trace. They say he was shattered across time and space. Haha, how could I say so without fear? I'm holding a piece of him right here. The follower then vanishes with a sound clip playing. That detail will be important later. The second follower says, it makes sense why Asgore would take so long to hire a new royal scientist. After all, the old one, Dr. Gaster, what an act to follow. They say he created the core. However, his life was cut short. One day he fell into his own creation. Will Alphys end up the same way? The third follower says, I understand why Asgore waited so long to hire a new royal scientist. The previous one, Dr. Gaster, his brilliance was irreplaceable. However, his life was cut short. One day his experiments went wrong and, Gaster. After all, it's rude to talk about someone who's listening. Now, what do we learn from these three fellas? Well, we learn that there was a royal scientist before Alphys who was apparently a genius. He created the core, which basically powers the entire underground in Undertale. However, during an experiment gone wrong, he fell into his own creation, disappearing without a trace. Now he is everywhere, and always listening, always watching. If you get a fun value of 66, a secret door appears in Waterfall. There's a small chance that when you enter this door, you see this figure. Approaching it causes it to vanish while making the same sound that the follower makes when they vanish. If you get a fun value of 65, you can access a sound test. This gives you access to some songs that aren't even in the game. One of these songs is called Gaster's Theme. Apart from fun values, the river person has a small chance to say, beware of the man who speaks in hands. Now, what does that have to do with Gaster? Well, in the True Lab, Alphys has 21 diary entries. However, there is no 17th entry. It goes from 16 straight to 18. But in the game's code, there's a 17th entry, written by the man who speaks in hands, Dr. Gaster. The entry reads, dark, darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? This theme of darkness growing and shadows cutting deeper is awfully similar to some of the things we see happening in Deltarune. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Another Gaster-related fun event happens if you get a fun value of 91 or higher. This event features an NPC known in the code as Goner Kid. He states, have you ever thought of a world where everything is exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. The thought terrifies me. If you come to this area with an umbrella in hand, the Goner Kid would instead state, "An umbrella? It's not raining." This does make me feel a little better about this. Thank you. Please forget about it. Please think about this. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is a little off subject, but it will relate back to Gaster. Goner Kid brings up the idea of a world where everything is exactly the same, except one person is missing. They also say that it is not raining, but are still thankful for the umbrella nonetheless. There's a song in Undertale associated with Sans. It is called "It's Raining Somewhere Else." There is a similar song in Deltarune that plays before you meet Sans, called "The Place Where It Rained." This explains why the Goner Kid is thankful for the umbrella, because they know it is raining somewhere else. And the place where it is raining is the Deltarune universe. This is one of many pieces of evidence that suggests that Sans from the Deltarune universe somehow got sent to and became trapped in the Undertale world. There's really countless pieces of evidence for this theory, but the main ones are that monsters in the Deltarune world bleed, while monsters in the Undertale world do not. The only exception to this rule is Sans, who in Undertale does bleed. Another piece of evidence is Sans' previous obsessions with wanting to go back and knowing the feeling of wanting to go home. Another piece of evidence is the only time the Icy mascot is seen in Undertale is on Sans' word search, while Icy is seen all over Deltarune and with having his own pizza place. Anyway, how does this all relate back to Gaster? We've already linked the Goners to Deltarune, but how could we for sure link Gaster himself with Deltarune? Well, the last Undertale secret we'll take a look at does exactly that. If you get a fun value anywhere from 80 to 89, then you will encounter Clam Girl in Waterfall. Clam Girl has this to say: "I'm visiting Waterfall from the city. Synchronicity? My neighbor's daughter looks about your age. Her name is Susie. I think you two should be friends. You have a neighbor's blessing. Not knowing where I live is not an issue. In life's grand scheme, she might be the reason why you came here in the first place." But in the Nintendo Switch version of Undertale, which was released mere months before Deltarune, Flame Girl has this to say: "So you never met my neighbor's daughter. Please don't despair. The time that you will meet her is fast approaching." She then turns black and white and disappears with the same sound that plays when Gaster and his followers disappear. Now you may ask, who is this Susie? Well, I believe that Susie is the Undertale version of Deltarune's Susie. Similar to how it is very possible that Frisk is the Undertale version of Deltarune's Chris. And Clam Girl referring to the time to meet Susie fast approaching is her referring to Gaster, connecting us with the Deltarune world very soon. If that is the case, then that begs the question, what is Susie's connection to Gaster? Why does Gaster have a connection to this important character in Susie? Susie, who is in Deltarune, the character with the power of hope and the power to change fate itself. Well, hold your horses there, friends. We'll get back to that one. For now, the important thing is we've linked Gaster to Deltarune. And when we look in Deltarune, the Gaster's connections become even more apparent. Deltarune begins with a sequence labeled in the code as the Goner Maker. The song that plays here is called Another Hymn and has the leitmotif of Gaster's theme. Basically, to us non-music nerds, that means that Gaster's theme and Another Hymn sound similar, use a similar melody. The reason for this is that Another Hymn means another piece of Gaster. We know from the followers that there are multiple pieces of him that were shattered across time and space. So since Another Hymn means another piece of Gaster, that means the voice that talks to you at the beginning of Deltarune, the one that connects the soul and thus the player to the Deltarune world, the voice that guides you to create a vessel, is Gaster. Or rather, a piece of Gaster. This is why he talks in all caps and has similar speech patterns as the piece of Gaster in Undertale, but unlike in Undertale, he does not speak entirely in wingdings. Anyway, after Gaster and the player create a vessel, another voice interrupts and discards the vessel and places the soul inside of Chris instead. We know this is another voice because in the code it is labeled as a separate character, and it's also in a different font, and is not in all caps, unlike when Gaster speaks. This second voice, I believe, is the key to solving Deltarune. This is where this discussion goes from being a discussion about secrets to being a pretty crazy conspiracy theory. So, bear with me here. This second voice, I believe to be the devil. Yep. Or in Deltarune's terms, the tale from hell. Image_friend. Now, who is Friend? Friend is a hidden character in Deltarune who makes multiple appearances. He has pink and yellow eyes similar to Spam. His most famous appearance is in Queen's basement. But he also appears in the ERAM boss fight, a fight very clearly tied to Chris's backstory, because ERAM themselves knows about Chris's backstory and history and their thoughts. Plus, the fight literally takes place in the very important bunker, which we'll get to later. Most importantly for now, he appears when Ralsei is talking about darkness and how it forms lies and illusions. I believe that Friend is the source of all darkness in the Dark Worlds, and is the one that shattered not only Gaster, but also Des across time and space. On Valentine's Day, Toby Fox sent out Valentine's cards to all the people subscribed to the Deltarune newsletter. These cards were each written by a Undertale or Deltarune character. Each subscriber redeemed a random card. However, the rarest card to get was one written by someone anonymous. The unnamed character who wrote this letter talks about how their goal is to help someone, but they can't remember who they were supposed to help. I believe the person who wrote this letter is the Eggman. Now you might ask, who the fuck is the Eggman? Isn't that a Sonic character? Well, you see, there are hidden rooms in each chapter of Deltarune where you meet a man hidden behind a tree. This man gives you an egg in each chapter. The most important one is in Chapter 4. Chapter 4's egg room takes place in a hospital, where Chris tries to remember what they saw behind the tree with the help of someone. But no matter how hard they try, they cannot bring themselves to draw what they saw. I believe the Eggman represents a memory that Chris is blocking out. This memory that is trying to be remembered, but can't because it is too painful. This memory that they are covering in their mind with a tree is the memory of when Friend tricked Chris and Des into following, which led them to the bunker. In the bunker, Des succumbed to darkness and was shattered across time and space. But Chris escaped. This is why in Chapter 4, Friend is known as the pointed tail from hell that shouldn't be followed. You see, along with the prophecy that states, they'll see the tail of hell take crawl. There's another prophecy that's in the same room that's used to get to the Chapter 4 egg room. This prophecy states the word roots. But next to it, there is a very important NPC. This NPC states, I heard something in between. Something in between. It was mixed up. Lost tail, the grow, the where the forest pointed, would follow the children. The poor children. That doesn't make a lot of sense now, does it? But keep in mind, this is in Susie's dark, the dark world that Susie creates in the church. A dark world where everything, including all the prophecies, are out of order, mixed up, messed up, everything's scrambled. Even the game mechanics function different. Plus, the NPC themselves says it was mixed up. So, if you unscramble this phrase, it becomes lost where the forest would grow. The children followed the pointed tail. The poor children. To me, this means that the children who followed the pointed tail, the children that followed Friend, were Chris and Des. They followed Friend into the bunker. They followed the pointed tail of hell. Des didn't make it out, but Chris did, likely saved by Asgore, which would explain why Asgore is blamed for Des's disappearance and feels immense guilt for it, thus why he is trying to find her. It also explains why Chris blocks the memory with a tree, because they were literally lost in a forest when this all occurred. But how does this all relate back to Gaster? Well, remember when I said Gaster was shattered across time and space? Well, I believe there are two pieces of Gaster. The corrupted piece we see in Undertale, and the normal one that guides you through Deltarune. The person responsible for Gaster being shattered, well, that is none other than our old friend. I believe that in Gaster's experiments with darkness, that we hear about in Entry 17, the experiment gone wrong that the followers mention, during those experiments, he unknowingly unleashed Friend upon the worlds. Friend would then make its way to the Deltarune world, and shatter Des across time and space as well. This is why Des is trapped in the code, but is also the Roaring Knight, because there's a corrupted piece of her that is the Knight, and there is the non-corrupted piece of her that is trapped in the code with Gaster. This non-corrupted piece of Des in the code has dialogue that states, Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone, anyone, can you hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something, please. No one can hear me, can they? I guess not. To be honest, I'm not even sure if I can hear myself. It's so quiet here, and yet sometimes I swear I hear something like scratching. Speaking of the reason why Des hears that scratching, on a somewhat lighter note, Friend is also a cat. Because of their appearance in the Cat Petters game on the Deltarune website, and in Noelle's stories, as well as both their appearances in Chapter 3 having cat ears, and its face being on the rarest cat in the Mike minigame. Speaking of Mike, Friend is likely also the one who corrupted Jevil and Spamton, and the one who was distributing out the Shadow Crystals. The Shadow Crystals are items that all the secret bosses have that show visions of varying things. These visions are likely what Jevil and Spamton saw to affirm their views of nothing mattering. Jevil believes that nothing matters, so why not cause as much chaos as possible? While Spamton believes that if nothing matters, then that is a bad thing. And Spamton is desperate to make things matter. This is why he is obsessed with ascending to a higher plane. This higher plane is known as the Angel's Heaven. If Friend is the devil of the Deltarune world, then the angel is the god of the Deltarune world. And heaven is where the angel sends lighteners that die. Only lighteners, though. Darkners cannot go to heaven. This is why Spamton is so desperate to obtain a human soul so he can go to heaven. The angel's heaven would be an event separate from the roaring. The roaring, I believe to be an event caused when Friend's darkness takes over the light world. But, dear viewer, I think that the angel's heaven is when the angel fights back against the roaring, attempting to counteract the roaring. However, the way it's fighting back is by destroying the world and sending everyone to heaven. That is why the heroes must defeat Friend and banish the angel, basically to bring balance between light and dark, balance between this good and evil forces. So, to recap, Friend is the voice that interrupted Gaster in the intro of Deltarune. They are also the one who put the soul inside of Chris, as one last fuck you to Chris. He couldn't shatter Chris across time and space, but at least he doomed them to death. Yes, despite Friend likely being defeated by the heroes at the end of the game, the only way to seal the angel's heaven, to force the angel to see that there is still good in the Deltarune world, that the world doesn't need to be destroyed, because wherever there's a friend, there are heroes to fight it. The only way to save the world is to kill Chris, to shatter the cage, to free the soul so it can banish the angel. Gaster wanted to create a vessel because he knew that the cage needed to be destroyed. He created a soulless being specifically to put the soul into to be the first hero. Then created Ralsei as the third hero and chose Noelle to be the second hero due to her immense power. However, things didn't go as planned since Friend intervened and put the soul in Chris instead. However, thanks to Susie and her extraordinary powers of hope and her ability to change fate, the prophecy can still come true, just not with the three heroes that Gaster envisioned. Yes, that is right. I believe that Gaster created the prophecy, specifically to warn the Lightners about the tale of hell, and to give them hope that they will still be saved when the roaring and the angels' heaven happens. If you need proof, the proof is in the original message on deltarune.com, written in wingdings. Three heroes appeared to banish the angels' heaven. Why would this excerpt from the prophecy be written in wingdings if it wasn't written by Gaster? Deltarune will end with the heroes finding out that the soul is the key to stopping the roaring. Yes, I believe the soul that we control, the soul that we are using to control Chris and to make them do things that they don't want to do, is the key to stopping the roaring. The soul is meant to be a representation of the player. It is Gaster connecting us to the game's world in an attempt to save it from the tale of hell. I believe the final prophecy states, the cage must be banished on the angel's day, with a picture of Susie killing Chris, with the soul floating above them. And my theory is that since Susie is the one that has the power to change fate, if she killed Chris while the soul is not in them, then Chris and the soul would no longer be tethered together. They would be separated, and Chris would permanently die. But the soul would live on. The soul becoming a separate entity from Chris and fully separating itself from Chris would be the key to saving the worlds. Since it is the one with the power to seal the fountains, maybe it's strong enough to banish the angel's heaven if it was freed from its cage. Freed from Chris. This also explains why Chris doesn't want to destroy the soul, even on the weird route. Because even though it is controlling them, making them do things against their will, it is the key to saving the world. Also explains why Susie knows that Ralsei wouldn't want the final prophecy to happen, and why Ralsei is so adamant why Susie should be kind and merciful. Also explains why Chris is working with Carol and doing actions to bring about the final prophecy, but still deep down wants to change it. I don't believe that Chris and Carol are working with the Knight willingly. I believe that the Knight is the corrupted piece of Des under the control of Friend, while Friend has the non-corrupted pieces of Des and Gaster trapped. Carol and Chris are intentionally trying to bring about the roaring because they are working with Friend. But not because they want to, because they are trying to trick Friend into thinking they are on his side. Specifically, they have a deal with Friend that if they bring about the roaring, then Friend will free Gaster, and now Undyne as well. This is why they are allowed in the bunker. I believe that Chris and Carol know that if the roaring happens, then the prophecy can still be fulfilled, and the tale of hell will take crawl, and the angel's heaven will be sealed. An extension to this theory is the weird route. It can even add a sympathetic, more complicated aspect to it. In the weird route, the player makes the Chris and Noelle do all this horrible stuff, make them get stronger, in a desperate attempt to prevent Chris's death. In the player's likely failed attempt to save Chris, they become a villain. They become no better than image_friend. Because friends are a beautiful thing, but the devil tricks us into thinking it is our friend. And then manipulates us into doing evil things with the justification that it will be for the greater good, only for the ending to become worse. That is the message of Deltarune. That we all have a choice. We all do what we want to do. We all do more or less what we think is right. However, sometimes our stubbornness to obtain our happiest ending can make us see past what is actually the right thing to do. And that stubbornness to have a better ending can lead us to giving in to the devil inside of us, the friend inside of us. Hey, thanks for watching. Yeah, that was some crazy nonsensical bullshit. A bonus theory, I didn't know where to fit this one in, but a bonus theory is that the garbage noise that plays during entry 17, that plays during the phone call, that plays when you use the phone in the Dark World, and plays during Spamton's phone calls, could potentially be Friend's voice. Friend reading what Gaster wrote in entry 17. Friend calling Chris to remind them of their deal. And Friend corrupting Spamton. I truly believe that Deltarune has the possibility to become one of the greatest games ever made, with the most masterfully crafted narrative out there. Thank you so much for listening to my crazy rambles.